Oh, that must have been good.
What was?
The usual.
Pick up trucks from other farms. And then we're full of people. It was amazing. And then you paid $10 to get in.
That's all.
That's it. You got to move out. Remember that Zeros, and they had a beer truck with 3 or 4 spigots out, and they would go get beer as much as you want. Even kids were getting beer.
Yeah, Wisconsin.
That's Wisconsin. Beer is like lemonade.
It's better for you. It's better for you than out.
Right. Yeah, this is northern Wisconsin. They got very cold.
Good morning, Susan. I see you brought your birds. Nice. I was saving your.
I didn't check email at all, I don't know. I wasn't good.
Excuse me, dear?
Yes,
Can I have what?
are you professionals? Is right in place.
Yes, I am. AC, what are the, ADD, you know, whatever, that kind of thing, yeah. They're very, everything has to be just so. Yep. Everything in its place for everything. Yep, that's me, unfortunately. Drives my wife crazy. And my kids. They always know when they hear clear the decks. Oh, cleaning time. They hate that. So their houses, their cars, total disaster. Total trashed. Total trashed. So it goes. Mr. Jesse, I have a job for you. We have circuit meeting tomorrow, and I am up for sermon critique.
Okay.
So if you could set up for me to show on there a sermon
Okay.
from January 22nd.
From January 22nd.
Okay.
Yep.
Said just get it ready to go, so all I have to do is,
Yep.
okay?
You go back here, you just
Yes.
have to press play and it'll play.
All right, perfect. That's what I need. Yes,
Are we allowed to attend
sure, you can sit in if you want. Yeah,
this meeting?
yeah, you're more welcome to do that if you want to be bored out of your brain.
Nothing about God bores me.
All right, okay, so, but if you want to do that, we won't call on you to speak Greek, okay?
Okay, I
Fair
can
enough.
speak a little bit of Hebrew,
Okay,
but
okay.
that's it.
Well, we might ask you to do that just for fun,
Okay.
but yeah.
I know the word God will
Hey, there you go. There you go. Well, by the clock, it says it's 9 o'clock. So let us continue. It is that magical, magical moment where we begin again. Time to sit down, take it easy, give attention. Alrighty, so questions and comments from the assembled mob. What do we got? Anything going on? Yes, sir, Mr. Bruce.
Sincere thank you to our president for protecting our airspace and not protecting any.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Balloon from who knows where. Yes, right.
And then also it's gonna start, IRS is starting to watch, waitresses' tips.
Uh-huh, good.
But he promised not to tax anybody.
Ah, good.
I know of no service person that makes over 400,000.
There you go, yeah. There you go. Okay, excellent. Excellent. What else? What's new with you? Anything? Questions? Come on. Comments? Complaints? Criticisms? Arguments? Debates? Yeah, go. Yes.
I talked to you about this.
Yes.
A woman in our Messianic group sent 67 text messages about her grandson's basketball game for everybody to pray for.
Ah, yes. Yes.
I was offended by that.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody else would be, but I think not that God's busy. 28,000 people, 100,000 in hospitals, and we have somebody that wants a group of people to pray for a high school basketball.
Ah, yes. Well, we are kind of a sports nutsy nation, aren't we? Yes, we are, unfortunately. Don't say me. Yeah, I consider such things to be kind of trite. If you're going to do that, I always tell people if they want to do that, that's fine. If they want to do that. If they want to ask their family maybe to do that, that's fine. But to ask 50 strangers to do that, it's just a little odd. You know, I mean, like you say, I mean, God's big. I told somebody the other day, had a lady come by for a little counseling, you might say, spiritual consultation, as I call it, and talked about prayer and maybe arguing, if you will, with God and such. And I said, you have to remember, God has very thick skin. He really does. I mean, when we talk about blasphemy with God and that God is offended, that's true enough from the standpoint of who we are and who God is. But it's not true when we think of God's temperament or his character. God is not liable to the same emotions that we are. God has emotions, yes. The Bible describes God as being angry. The Bible describes God as being loving. The Bible describes God as forgetting. The Bible uses a lot of human terminology to describe God because that's all it has to work with, all right? But at the same time, we have to remember that God is way beyond those things. And so it is not as though these things, take God away from important duties or clutter his calendar, so to speak. That's not true. That's not true at all. But in the sense that these things are not important to the overall plan of salvation, either for yourself as individuals or for other people, is more to the point. And that's really what we get. If you're gonna pray about something, you certainly can pray about anything. There's no question about that. I'm not denying that at all. And if you want to pray about your cat being sick, or you want to pray about your son's or grandson's basketball game, okay, fine, that's fine. But remember that what God is really interested in and what he wants to hear from us and what we need from him is actions that will end in our eventual and eternal salvation. That's really the way, if we're going to break things down and, you know, what is important to put into our prayers and what is not so important to put in our prayers, eternal salvation is really kind of the thing to go with, though, right? Yeah, Bruce?
Yeah, I understand that we're supposed to help bring people to Christ.
Right.
It's up to them to change their mind.
Right.
Spirit.
Right.
And to me, when this stuff happened, she was so happy to tell her grandson that he won the first game.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is he now thinking? Oh yeah, God's there, he's on my
Mhm,
side. And now
mhm.
the final, they lose.
Yeah,
So did that turn him away from God?
you are. It could be. That's very true. Yeah.
People don't think about this stuff.
Yeah.
And when you do things like this,
Yeah.
if it goes south,
Yeah.
they're going to blame God. They're
Sure.
not going to blame you.
Sure.
He's not going to blame his grandmother. He's going to blame God.
Right. And this is the problem with what I call gumball theology. Gumball theology is you put a prayer in the slot, you shake it, you know, move it, and a gumball comes out. You put a prayer in the slot, you move it, and God grants you what you want. And a lot of preachers and a lot of churches teach that you know, to get what you want, you have to have enough faith. And that if you don't get what you want, you don't have enough faith. They literally teach that, okay? Yeah, and that's wrong theology. That's bad theology. That's blasphemous. Talk about blasphemy. That's blasphemous theology because, as I told this person on Saturday, there are three. God answers every prayer of a believer. God doesn't even hear the prayers of unbelievers. But God answers every prayer of believers. There's three answers. Yes, no, and later, or wait. The most difficult of those is the last one, right? Because we don't know the difference between no and maybe, or no and wait, or no and later. We don't know the difference because we don't get what we want. We assume it's no. Maybe we should always assume it's later. But then eventually later turns into no, doesn't it? When we were kids, what did we hate to hear from our parents? Later. I mean, we hated no, but we hated later more. At least I did. Okay? Because later meant, yeah, maybe, you know. And a lot of times later turned into no, didn't it? For whatever reason, it turned into no.
And you might be very happy of it.
Well, yeah, that's true too. We might be glad that it turned into no. But you know, and we would play the game, you know, ask mom first, and she says no, then go to dad and hope he says yes, or vice versa. All right? But then when you get later from both of them, you know you're up a creek. Okay? You know. And so it's the same way with God. When God says later, we of course we don't know that. And so, as I say, maybe we should always assume no when we don't get what we want in a relatively quick period of time. Shut up, you. Or maybe we should just always assume later. I don't know. I don't know which is more important, one or the other. But anyway, yeah, I think prayer is very greatly misunderstood by the vast majority of Christians, frankly, because the vast majority of Christians belong to churches that teach prayer as a means of grace. Prayer is not a means of grace. Prayer is not a sacrament. Okay? It is a sacrament in the Roman Church. It's a sacrament in the Baptist-type churches. Okay? Most of Protestantism and all of Romanism and all of Orthodoxy, it is a sacrament. Prayer is a sacrament. It's a means of grace. It is a means of attaining salvation. That is not what the Bible teaches. You cannot pray yourself into salvation. You cannot pray for salvation even. Okay? Because in order to pray for salvation, you would have to understand that you're a sinner and need to be saved. And you can't come to that conclusion unless already by grace. Okay? Grace not only gives you faith, grace actually leads you to faith. Okay? So when we say by grace, we're saying both things. We're saying our repentance comes from grace and our conversion comes from grace. Both of those things come from grace. No one can say that Jesus is Lord except by the Holy Spirit. All right? So you cannot pray for salvation. That is impossible because you have to be a saved person, a believer, in order to pray correctly. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Just by the fact that you are praying
Exactly. So the person who is watching Billy Graham, or a modern day version of Billy Graham, his son, whatever his name is, Franklin, listening to that and saying, "Pray with me the sinner's prayer," and all this kind of stuff. If you do that, if you pray the sinner's prayer, and if you say, "Jesus, please come into my heart," you're already a believer. He's already there. Okay. So yes, that's right. If you pray, you're already a believer. And as I told this person, they were very afraid of their salvation. I don't know if I'm saved or not. I don't know if I believe enough. And I said, well, ask yourself this question: do you care whether or not you're going to heaven or hell? Oh, I care. I want to go to heaven. That's saving faith, right there. Because if you didn't care, you wouldn't have faith. Okay? The only reason you care is because you believe what the Bible says about you and about sin, and so therefore you believe you are a believer. All right? And the person looked at me and, wow, I didn't think of it that way. Well, that's exactly the way you ought to think of it. Okay? So if you ask yourself that question, if you ever find yourself looking in the mirror and saying, gee, I don't know whether or not I'm saved, you are saved just by the fact that you're asking the question. Okay? So if you hear yourself asking that question, okay, I'm good to go, right? If you don't care, if you never ask that question, or if somebody asks you that question, you go, who cares? Or everybody is, then that's the time to worry. But of course you won't worry because you're not a believer, okay? And unbelievers don't worry. Unbelievers don't worry about hell. They don't. They're not concerned about it. Why? Because they figure they're going to either disappear out of existence, or they're going to get to heaven anyway. Universalism has become a very, very popular belief today. Everybody's going to make it, no matter what you are. And that's kind of the thought behind most religious movements today. Last thing. Any questions further on this topic or others? All right, I put the Get It thing back on the board again this week because I did find some more information. Let me share with you what I found. And it just kind of corroborates what I said a couple of weeks ago. I looked at the website a little more thoroughly, shall I say, went through all of the material, and frankly, there's not a whole lot of material on the website. The website, the articles on there and the videos are very short. The articles are very short. They're very general. They're not really specific, and so it's very hard to kind of decipher exactly what they're getting at. I think they do that on purpose. Maybe I'm being cynical, but that's what I see. The group is a group called Servant Foundation. If you're curious about where the money comes from, and it's been a lot of money, $20 million so far has been spent on ads, and I believe another 20, they say, is going to be spent today alone on the Super Bowl commercials and commercials on the stations surrounding the Super Bowl. So they have, last I found, looking at their financials, the Servant Foundation is funded by another group called the Signatry. S-I-G, N-A-T-R-Y, Signatry. The Signatry is a group of maybe 20, well, they're not sure exactly how many because they're all anonymous. These are anonymous people. A couple of them are known. One of them is the founder and owner of Hobby Lobby, which, as you may know, is a very outspoken Christian. And he has done a lot of things. Yeah, he has done a lot to promote Christianity over the years. Thank you, Terry. There's another dozen, maybe 15 other families who have contributed to this organization. It's been around for 10 years, more than 10 years. It's kind of met a few times trying to decide what to do. Their concern seems to be, and again, it's hard to pin down exactly, but their concern seems to be mostly the division in our culture. And by culture, I mean Western civilization culture, mostly America, but also including Western Europe. Their big push is to heal divisions and to get people to love one another and be at peace with one another and accept and respect one another and that kind of thing. That seems to be their overall motivation. And they have chosen to use the life of Jesus to try to bring that about. So they're using Jesus here, and they make a big point about saying it doesn't matter if you're a believer or an unbeliever. It doesn't matter if you're Christian or Muslim. It doesn't matter if you're Buddhist or Roman or Greek Orthodox or whatever you are. It doesn't matter. The life of Jesus should motivate you to treat people with more respect, to accept them, to be kind to them, to be nice to them, etc., etc., etc. So that seems to be their overall impetus, their overall objective seems to be to heal divisions and to bring about peace and to bring about to stop animosity between groups. Okay, for everybody to accept everybody else's opinion, okay, even if you disagree with it. I disagree with your opinion, but I love you and like you and want you over for dinner anyway. That's their objective, and they've decided that Jesus is the way to accomplish that. So it's really not about conversion. As a matter of fact, one of their commercials, it asked the question: Is Jesus gets us trying to get me to go to church? And they give a one-word answer. And that one-word answer is no. Well, I have a problem with that. Not just because I make my living from people that come to church, but I have a problem with that because whereas I understand the point, as I said in my sermon not too long ago, true, it's all true. Yeah, you don't have to go to church to be saved, that's true. But where else are you going to get the means of grace? The sacraments, okay, can be done privately. You can have private absolution, confession. You can have private baptism. You can have baptism with just two people, okay? You can have the Lord's Supper with just two people, okay? Private communion or individual communion, that's possible. But the sacraments were instituted mostly for the group, the church, okay? And for the church to practice as a group. So where we have absolution to the group, and we have Lord's Supper for the group, and we have baptism in front of the whole church. Not all the time, but very often. So that's a bad answer. Because if you ask the question, does God want you to go to church? The answer is yes. The answer is not no. Okay? So if you're a movement that wants to base itself on Jesus, as I said last Sunday I was here, Jesus was in the synagogue, wasn't he? Yeah, he was. Or four Sundays ago, whichever it was, when he was in Nazareth. He went to the synagogue, as was his custom. All right? So for a group that bases itself on the life of Christ, to say, are you trying to get me to go to church? And the answer is no, there's a problem there. Okay? There's a problem there. That's disingenuous. That's not the genuine life of Jesus. A couple other things I found out in reading through all of their stuff. They make the proclamation that Jesus was fed up with politics. Jesus was fed up with politics. Is that proven by the life of Christ? No, it's not. He was not fed up with politics. He didn't have much political to say except, my kingdom is not of this world. Now, simply saying my kingdom is not of this world does not mean he was fed up with politics, because he said, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. That's not somebody who was fed up with politics, frankly, okay? And that's not even counting the stuff that St. Paul wrote about government and so on and so forth. Another thing that one of the commercials said, and luckily they give the complete text of the commercial so I can read it, not just listen for it. Jesus suffered anxiety. Jesus suffered anxiety. And again, the first one, of course, to those who are sick of politics. So it's reaching to those. And to the next one, those who suffer anxiety. Okay, the person I counseled the other day, great anxiety, okay, panic attacks, this kind of thing, all right? That's extremely prevalent in our society today. Maybe has been for the last 40, 50 years, okay? Didn't used to be a problem, now it's a big problem, okay? Anxiety, and especially anxiety-based depression, okay? Clinical depression, anxiety-based clinical depression, okay? Which is, anxiety and depression are two opposite things, so it's always been interesting to me that the one leads to the other. But anyway, that be by itself. That's another whole discussion. Did Jesus suffer anxiety? Do you think?
Anxiety when he was asking that, he not have to go.
Okay, I should ask a different way. What is, to you, when you hear the word anxiety, what is that? Fear, worry, okay. Lack of trust, okay. Yeah, concern, doubt, okay. When Jesus said, "Let this cup pass from me," I don't want to do this, right? Knowing what's coming, knowing how the Romans killed people, knowing what the process of crucifixion, which included scourging, including a bunch of other things, okay, included hanging stark naked, literally, not the way we see Jesus with a nice little loincloth on, but literally, absolutely naked to the world, okay, hanging there, bleeding to death, crown of thorns, whole 9 yards. He knew that was coming, and he said, "Let this cup pass from me. I don't want to do this." Would you consider that to be anxiety, lack of trust, fear, or concern? Concern for who? Okay, he was a 100% human being. And so therefore he had some concerns about this. He also was concerned for his followers. How are his followers going to react? He knew. He said, "You will all scatter. You will all betray me, every single one of you. You will all run away." Okay? So what was he concerned about? He was concerned that maybe this would destroy some of their faith from a human standpoint. Of course, he knew that they would all come back, except for Judas. He knew that. So could you say that Jesus suffered anxiety? No. Not anxiety the way we define it today, because we define it today, as you all just did, except for Harry, okay, as worry, fear, lack of trust, doubt. Jesus didn't suffer those things. Those are sins. To doubt God is a sin. To not trust God is a sin. Okay? Jesus did not sin. He was tempted to doubt God. Yes. He was concerned. Okay? He was tempted to fear. Again, concerned. He was tempted to question. Again, concerned. But he did not actually do those things. So to say that Jesus suffered anxiety is simply wrong. It does not understand the two natures of Christ. All right? Another commercial called Jesus a refugee. Was Jesus a refugee? Ambassador, I like that. I like that. Was Jesus a refugee? And it used for an example that he ran away, or his parents took him away to Egypt during the last years of Herod's life. Does that mean that Jesus was a refugee? Out of Egypt I have called my son. Where was he a refugee? Where was the Son of God, creator of the universe, where was he a refugee? Where could he be a refugee? Nowhere. He owns the world. He couldn't be a refugee in Egypt because he owns Egypt. Okay? Not only that, but why was he in Egypt? Why was Jesus in Egypt as a child? Oh, come on, folks. Who told Joseph to take his family to Egypt? God. Okay? If you're following God, you're not a refugee. Okay? All right? If any of those people along the border down there could prove they got a message from God to bring them from Guatemala to Los Angeles, they wouldn't be a refugee, would they? No, they would be following God's will. They're not a refugee, okay? Now, I don't know that anybody claims that, but anyway. So to say that Jesus was a refugee so that he can appeal to those who either support the refugees, illegal aliens, whatever, or those who are refugees, truly in this world, is, again, saying a falsehood in order to appeal to a particular group. Okay, so that's not right. What did I write there? Oh, Jesus fought oppression. Did Jesus fight oppression? Give me an example when Jesus... Yeah, during his life, did Jesus... Give me an example of during Jesus' life in the four Gospels where Jesus fought against oppression. You can't do it, can you? Because it didn't happen. It didn't happen. Okay? Never once did Jesus pick up a rock to throw at the Roman soldiers. Never once did he pick up a sword to attack Herod's guards. Never once did he tell people to form a battalion of believers to go after the Romans or Herodians and whatever, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Could you say, well, maybe he fought oppression with the Pharisees and scribes, which, by the way, the site never mentions them, by the way, which I found interesting anyway. But I'll get to that in a minute. Fought oppression. I think they used for an example here that Jesus ate with lepers, tax collectors, and prostitutes and lepers. How is that fighting oppression? I suppose if you stretch it really far, you can say, I guess, meeting with outcasts in society is fighting oppression, but that's really stretching it. Yeah. Okay. He fought against work righteousness. Yes. Okay. I don't know if that's... Okay, he fought against the oppression of work righteousness. And that's not the kind of oppression we talk about today. We talk about oppression today. We're talking about, Jim Crow laws, in the South, segregation. Yeah, we're talking about worldly oppression, and that's what these people mean. That Jesus didn't. Yeah, Jesus didn't do that. He fought against sin, yes, and he fought against work righteousness. Excellent point, Terry. The last commercial says that Jesus was a radical. Jesus was a radical. And again, what they're trying to do is they're trying to set Jesus up as much different than the leadership of today. Leadership of today, you think of the suits, right? The political suits who are, everyone, they're carbon copies of each other. There's not a dime's worth of difference between a Republican, a Democrat, conservative, liberal. They're all the same. They all want power. And they all want to stay in power. They want power. They want to get power and stay in and keep power. That's every politician of every stripe. I don't care what political party you're talking about or what political thoughts you're talking about. That's what they want. Get power and stay in power. So if you're talking about that, Jesus didn't care about political power at all. Was he a radical? Well, in the sense that, again, going back to Terry's point, by this time in religion, especially in Israel, work righteousness was the religion. Okay, go to the temple, do your sacrifices. Don't do certain things on the Sabbath. Observe the Sabbath strictly. Et cetera, et cetera. Those things will, get you into paradise or get you into heaven. It's doubtful that most Jews at Jesus' day even believed in heaven by this time. Okay, very doubtful. Some did, most did not. And Jews still to this day don't believe in the afterlife today. They don't believe in the eternal soul. So, and that was true in Jesus' day. So that Jesus was a radical in the sense that he talked about salvation by grace alone through faith, although it didn't use that exact formula that was come on with St. Paul. But the fact that he was teaching a radically different way of salvation, okay, I guess I could call him a radical from that standpoint. He was a philosophical radical, or maybe he was a theological radical. But he was not a radical in the sense that that word is mostly understood today. Again, this is a way to appeal to the radical element in our society today. And those exact people who don't want to go to church, want nothing to do with so-called organized religion, all right? And this group, too, has some very pointed critical remarks to make about organized religion, right? Which, frankly, I have to admit, are mostly true. Yes, sir?
I think the way they raved about his preaching, that he read and preached so well, might be considered radical to them, inoffensive.
Well, yes, I will agree with that. There were a lot of rabbis wandering around Israel at this time, a lot of religious teachers, even those who claimed to be messiahs, that preached. They didn't preach all that well, frankly. They didn't really connect with the people as well as Jesus did. They certainly didn't back up their preaching with miracles the way Jesus did. And now in the temple, there was teaching, but there wasn't really preaching. In the synagogues, there wasn't, as I mentioned the other day, there wasn't really preaching. There was kind of a rolling commentary, maybe. And most of the rolling commentary on the Old Testament was, again, very legalistic. Okay, there wasn't a whole lot of gospel in there. All right. So yes, in that sense, we have in the Bible numerous times where the people who hear Jesus say among themselves, "This man speaks differently than we have heard before." Now, I don't know if you want to call that radical or not, but it certainly was different. It certainly was different. Okay. So, to kind of sum all this up, what is their point? Their point is to try to heal divisions in society, try to get people to accept one another for what they are, no matter what they are, and doesn't get into specifics. In the sense the word get is used in our vocabulary today, when you say to somebody, "I get it," they're explaining to you how the rockets take off from Cape Canaveral and go into space. And they're talking about, the laws of physics and gravity and so. And you hear that and you say, "Oh, okay, I get it." All right? If Harry or Dale here were to explain to one of you how an airplane flies, okay? The difference between the air pressure below the wing and the air pressure above the wing, and why the wing is shaped the way it is, and everything. As they would describe that to you, you would finally, hopefully at one point say, "Oh, okay, I get it." Which means what? When you say that, what does it mean? I understand, I accept it. I accept what you're saying is true. Or I accept what you're saying is correct or right. So that's what the word get means in our vocabulary today. So when you hear "he gets us," and us means everybody, obviously, okay, what does that tell you? What is that trying to say?
He understands that everybody's sin is okay. That everybody.
I don't know that you want to say that. I don't know if you want to say sin is okay. But I think what you really want to say is there are sins and there are things that are not sins. All right? And Jesus would say, by Jesus saying Jesus gets us, he would say Jesus accepts. Okay? Jesus accepts people of all opinions. Okay? Except what? An unloving opinion. Right? Jesus gets me as a homosexual. Jesus gets me as an abortion supporter. Jesus gets me as a man who is trapped in a woman's body. Jesus gets me as a drug addict. Jesus gets me as a sex worker, prostitute. Jesus gets me, okay, name a group, okay? Any group you want to name. Name any group that is out of sorts necessarily with most of society. And they would be saying, oh, no, it's okay. Jesus gets you. It's all right. Jesus accepts you just the way you are, as Mr. Rogers would say. Okay? Mr. Rogers, I love you just the way you are.
Way of saying all is welcome.
Right. Same thing. Because Jesus sat with lepers and prostitutes and tax collectors, he would also sit with homosexuals and drug addicts and you fill in the blank, whatever thing you could think of. Okay, that's really what's going on here, and you really can't find anything in the entire website anywhere. And I read the whole thing, border to border, beginning to end, top to bottom. There's nothing in there about other doctrines. There's nothing in there about creation. There's nothing in there about evolution. There's nothing in there about homosexuality. There's nothing in there about any of the hot topics that are being debated today in society. Nothing. Not a single solitary word. The only message that keeps getting across is love everybody, accept everybody, be kind to everybody, be generous with everybody, give everybody mercy and patience, everything. Okay, so don't discuss the hot topics. As a matter of fact, there's one paragraph that actually says that. Don't get into those areas. Okay, just leave them alone. Okay, let people have whatever opinions they want to have, and don't try and change anybody. Right, except you're going to change them to be accepting of whatever. Right. So what this is, just a second, Harry, Anthony. What this is another very subtle, very clever, I would say, very hidden kind of universalism. That's basically what's going on here. And to turn Jesus into a universalist, okay, so that all roads lead to heaven no matter what you believe. Okay. Yes, sir.
More inspirational than a guide to salvation.
They don't talk at all about salvation. They don't talk at all about going to heaven. There is one line in there where they talk about this group, the signatory group, as being people made up of those who believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Okay, so the original group, the original 12 to 15 families, anonymous families, well, including the Hobby Lobby guy, believe that Jesus is the Son of God. The bigger group, the Servant Foundation, includes people who do not believe that. Includes Muslims and others who do not accept that thought. And so it's clear to me that what this signatory group did is begin another effort in another group then that is trying to accomplish something of a very general nature. I don't know whether it'll work or not. Tony's first. Go ahead.
The main thing, all the items that you mentioned here once, I did not really see that they're achieving what they're supposed to be achieving, that is advertising. And to advertise it is to be able to draw people in and into your church. Okay, so they're not accomplishing that.
No, they're not. They don't want to. They don't want to do that. They specifically say
to have a billboard, a slogan, something like this.
they want to change behavior.
Yeah, well, they really want you to come through the door and give your bucks too.
Nope, they don't want that. They specifically say that. They have, according to, I was just saying before Terry walked in, they have $3 billion in their treasury. They don't need your money.
Give out all this money, expect nothing in return.
They're getting plenty from these 20 some odd families.
Also, Signatory has real estate. Because if you look up Signatory, you just look it up. They have all these different businesses that they want people to invest in.
Yes. They are a very rich group of people, and they don't need your money, and they don't want your money, and they don't want you to go join a particular church. They don't want to convert you. They're not looking for any of that. Again, their goal is, for all intents and purposes, extremely simple. They want people's behaviors to change. They want people who, let's say, for lack of a better word, hate homosexuality or hate homosexuals to stop hating homosexuals. They want people to accept them as they are, not trying to change them. They want the pro-life people to love the pro-abortion people. They want the pro-abortion people to love the pro-life people. Okay? They want the transgender people to love the anti-transgender people. They want the anti-transgender people to love the transgender people, and so on. That's what they want. That's all they want. They don't want nothing else. They want divergent groups to stop fighting each other. That's what they want. And they're using the life of Jesus to try and bring this about.
In my opinion, because we're seeing a lot of entertainers, a lot of business people, like you said,
Mhm.
that's trying to say, I am maybe holy or I am worthy of your business because I am a Christian. They're trying to get on board that way, and that's how they're making the money, saying, I am good, do business with me.
Yeah, well, I more likely I am woke, okay? Which being woke simply means I agree with the majority of society. And the majority of society, all of a sudden, really over a very short period of time, now accepts not just homosexuality, but transgenderism and even radical transgenderism, abortion, etc. Okay, so all these things are now acceptable in society that were not acceptable in society 40, 50 years ago, right? And so that's wokeism, and a lot of Christian leaders, you're right, a lot of Christian leaders are saying that's Christianity. Christianity is not to judge anybody. If two guys get married, don't judge them, accept them. Okay, two women get married, don't judge them, accept them. That's Christianity. Well, that's a false Christianity. That's not what the Bible teaches. That's not what Jesus would teach. That's the opposite. That's right. But see, it's because they're in the majority, and because they have the loudest voice, and because they have the most money, this is what the majority of people hear. And so very quickly, in the blink of an eye, historically speaking, we have completely changed, 180 degrees, completely changed from what was good is now evil, and what was evil is now good. Completely, yes. Yes, it's still alive. Yes, Willow Creek, Saddleback too, Rick Warren thing. Yeah, right, exactly. Yes, right. Yeah, you have to think. You have to think like we think. Yeah, Rick Warren at Saddleback just retired. Big church like Willow Creek. The guy at Willow Creek, Bill Hybels at Willow Creek. He quit a few years ago, and before he quit, he did some research, and he found out that twice as many people were going out the back door of his church as were coming in the front door.
President throws, I am a Christian.
Yes.
He's a big hypocrite, is what he is.
He doesn't think it that way. He doesn't think that way at all. He goes along. He follows the Pope. Okay, and the Pope says, well, if somebody wants to believe in abortion, let him. If somebody wants to believe in homosexuality, let him. If somebody wants to believe in evolution, let him. If somebody wants to believe that hell doesn't exist, that's okay. There'll be nobody in there anyway. This is what the Pope has decreed since he's come into power, the current one, and so he's just following the Pope. That's all he's doing. Now, the American bishops, of course, have taken an opposite line, and the Pope is arguing with them. And I think that's really interesting. Most of the bishops are old guys. They're old school, and they're saying, no, that's not true. Benedict, the previous Pope, was old school. Okay, and he was a guy who wouldn't tolerate that, and that's why he resigned, because he could see the handwriting on the wall. He wasn't going to be followed by anybody.
They even walked on birth control.
Right.
And really, what we need today is not all this money spent on abortion. We need birth control, because if the women didn't get pregnant.
No, we need the exact opposite of that. What we need is we government. I don't know that I doubt it would work, but we would need the government to do the exact opposite, give tax breaks to people who have 3 or more children because we're dying out, folks. The replacement rate, you know what the replacement rate in the United States is right, or the birth rate in the United States is right now? Okay, right now, okay, you need 2.1 children per fertile female to replace each generation. You need 2.1 children, okay? Our birth rate right now in the United States of America, 1.7. Okay? We are not even replacing ourselves. The only reason that we have enough people to work the garbage trucks and to change linens at or to sack your groceries and to change linens at your hotels, the only reason that we have anybody to do those jobs is because of illegals. If you take out the migrants, okay, illegal and legal for that matter, but legal's a drop in a bucket. If you take out the illegal aliens, your trash service folks will not just go from twice a week to once a week, it'll go from twice a week to once a month. Don't doubt me on this, folks. Do not doubt me on this. All right, look at other countries. Look at France right now. Yesterday, 1 million French people, 1 million French people went to the streets, violently protesting, rioting, simply because France wanted to move the age of retirement from 62 to 64. It's not even 65 or 67 like it is for us. It's 62 right now. Okay? Why do they want to move it from 62 to 64? Because they have no people. They have not enough workers to support their retirement programs, what we would call Social Security. They don't have enough people. Germany doesn't have enough people. Belgium doesn't have enough people. The Netherlands doesn't have enough people. Britain doesn't have enough people. None of the countries, Europe, Italy, Spain, Portugal, none of them have enough workers to support their very generous retirement benefits.
Neither do we.
Well, neither do we, except for illegals.
Decline in population.
Yeah. I mean, thank God these people are having children like crazy. Otherwise, we'd be in even worse shape. Otherwise, this would be 1.2. If you take out the illegal births in what we call the anchor babies, you take the anchor babies out, folks, we're down to 1.2, which is just about the lowest in the whole world.
You know, but they don't have any birth control and they're being raped daily.
For whatever reason, like I said, thank God for these people. Otherwise, you and I would be sacking our own groceries, and you and I would be hauling our own trash down to the dump.
But the illegals, they can't work and pay taxes. They're paid under the table.
A lot of them do work. Nobody fills out I-9s anymore.
I know we do because we.
Oh yeah, the big corporations do. But you listen to anybody, they'll tell you 3/4 of the American economy is little mom and pop operations, little small businesses, and they don't fill out I-9s anymore. Nobody does. And like I told you, as I traveled through the Imperial Valley, you don't see these people driving junky cars anymore. They're driving Infinitis. They're driving Acuras. They're driving Lexus. All right? And so how do they do that without paying taxes? Well, they do pay taxes. That's the point. Right? And so I don't want to get into that debate. But just to tell you, okay, so anyway, back to this. All right? You have more info now. When you see these, if you watch the game today, I don't know if you do or not, if you care. But if you do, when you see that, judge for yourself if what I'm saying is true. Okay? All right, let's go back to Exodus. We don't have a lot of time. Let's see if we can finish up this section, before we get to verse 29. So from 14 to 29, you've already read that according to what I've been told. And so let's go back to page 61. And top of the page, 61, at letter O, In the verses 14 to 20, God gives the events of that night in an historic perspective for the people of Israel. So what God is trying to do, God is trying to do is for, again, future generations. Remember that the Bible is written for all time. Not just written for the people of that time that it happened to. It's written for future generations. And so God wants the future generations to be able to read this and understand the context, the historical context that it's in. Certainly, Israelites sensed that something great and important was happening to them, both as individuals and as a people. God told them the true and lasting significance of what they were doing that night and in the week following, and that this would be celebrated throughout the centuries and for all generations to come. And I think, frankly, folks, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, but I think, frankly, the reason that God has allowed the Jewish people to survive this long is to continually commemorate these historical events. Unfortunately, the vast majority of Christianity does not commemorate this anymore. That's sad. That should not be. The vast majority of Christianity does not celebrate the Exodus. They should, but they don't. And so God allows the Jewish people, Jewish religion, Jewish culture, Jewish genetic people, whatever, to continue to exist so that they, at least, can continually celebrate this event. Because God said that would happen. If it wasn't for the Jews, would anybody even care or know or even talk about the Passover at all, period? I don't know. Probably not. So if you want to know why the Jews are still around, this is one reason. Not maybe the main reason, but it is one reason why God allowed them to be around, to continue to make this prophecy true. As we have seen, God had made the day of the Passover to be the first day of the new year, at least the religious new year. All the feast of the celebration of a new era in anticipation of a time when all things would be new again in eternity. God is sending a message. He said, you should mark time based upon spiritual things. If you want to mark time based on the skies, the stars, the sun and the moon, or when a king becomes king, or when a president becomes president, whatever. If you want to do that, that's fine. He doesn't say anything bad about it. He doesn't say you can't do that. But he said, when it comes to your spiritual life, when it comes to your life, and when it comes to your ideas about religion, when it comes to ideas about your spirituality, your soul, then you should mark time in an eternal sense. You should mark time by eternal truths. So that's what we do, whether we realize it or not. I mean, somebody mentioned the other day that the two most popular holidays in the United States today, more money is spent on these two holidays combined than on Christmas. You know what they are? Halloween and Valentine's Day. Okay? Halloween, even though it's taught to people that it is a pagan holiday, it's not. It is All Hallows Eve, okay, which is a religious day. So it started out as a religious day. Imbolc, which was carried on by the Druids and whatever, it was on a different day. Okay, so when you're talking about actual October 31st, Halloween, that Hallows Eve, or Halloween, is not Imbolc. That was a different day. Now, a lot of people have simply moved it to that day in order to make it a pagan holiday, but it wasn't a pagan holiday. It's a religious holiday. And of course, St. Valentine's Day is about St. Valentine's. Okay, and what did St. Valentine's do? He put his life on the line, okay, so that people could continue to marry. Okay, the emperor had forbidden his soldiers to marry. He figured that marriage interfered with their jobs as soldiers. And so he put an edict out there that priests, whether they were Roman priests in the Roman pantheon of gods, or whether they were Christian priests or Jewish rabbis or whatever, nobody, whoever they were, could do any marriages between soldiers and women and soldiers. No, women were soldiers in those days. And Valentine said pooey on that. If I have a couple coming to me and one of them is a Roman soldier and they want to get married, I'm going to marry him. And so he's put in jail. And for disobeying the emperor's edict, he was beheaded. And while he was in jail, he fell in love with the jailer's daughter and wrote her little notes and signed his notes, "Your Valentine." And that's the rest of the story. Okay? So it's a religious day. And so no matter how people try, it's like I told you before about, CE and BCE, common era before common era. What do they use to divide the two? The birth of Christ. So, do they accomplish what they want to accomplish? No, they don't. They're still using the birth of Christ to separate these two eras of history. So, again, this is God's interest in calendars and God's interest in history is to keep us mindful that the march of history should end with our eternal salvation. Beginning with verse 21, Moses repeats God's instructions to the elders of the people and through them to the whole congregation. This address must have taken place on the 10th day of the month, for Moses tells them to select their lambs for the Passover that very day. Okay? So why is Passover seldom celebrated by New Testament believers today? Very simple reason. Very, extremely simple reason. Anybody? They're dumb, yeah. Simpler than that, actually. Yes, it's bigotry. It's bigotry. That's all it is, folks. It's simple, unadulterated bigotry, prejudice against the Jews. That's all it is. There's no other reason. Now, you can say, if you want, that the Jews brought this on themselves by betraying the Christians, because at one point in history, the Christians were not persecuted by the Romans, or anybody, really, but we're talking really about the Romans. The Christians were not persecuted by the Romans. Why? Because the Romans considered the Christians a branch of Judaism. And Romans never persecuted the Jews. They persecuted them politically, but they didn't persecute them religiously. So, yes, they fought wars against them politically. But as far as the religion was concerned, the emperors of Rome were very, very tolerant of Judaism. They allowed the Jews not to participate in the cult of the emperor, that is the emperor's god. They allowed them not to do that. They allowed them not to worship Zeus and the Roman pantheon of gods. They were the only people that were ever allowed this in the history of the 1,000-year history of Rome. They were the only people that were ever allowed the privilege of not having to worship Roman gods. Only people. And this was only because Emperor Augustine was so impressed with their moral teachings, the Ten Commandments. He was so impressed with the Ten Commandments and their moral teachings, the ceremonial law, he was so impressed by that he made an edict that the Jews should never be persecuted, they should never be forced to worship any god but their own. And as long as the Christians were seen as a branch of Judaism, they were not persecuted. But in the middle of the first century, middle of the second century actually, in the middle of the second century, Jewish leaders had a conference in Palestine. And at that conference, they passed a resolution, if you will, we'd call it, I guess, and sent that resolution to Rome and said, the Christians are not part of us. We deny them. We eschew them. We reject them. They are not part of Judaism. Now, when the Romans and the authorities get that resolution, if you will, they say, oh, the Jews say that the Christians are not part of the Jewish religion. Well, if they're not part of the Jewish religion, they don't get a pass anymore. They have to worship Roman gods. Okay? The Christians, of course, knew this. They found this out, that the Jews had betrayed them. And that's when they began to distance themselves from the Jews. And they began to hate anything that was Jewish. Now, at this time, a lot of the Jewish members had intermarried with Christians, and so there weren't really pure Jewish families in Christianity anymore, not many, very few. And so it really didn't matter to them that they stopped celebrating the Sabbath. They stopped, that is on Saturday, they stopped celebrating Hanukkah, they stopped celebrating Purim, they stopped celebrating Passover, they stopped all that to mark a difference. Okay, said to the Jews basically, okay, you don't want us? Fine, we're going to not want you either. And so we deny our heritage. We deny our connection to you, the Jews. So you could say that the Jews kind of brought this on themselves, but that still doesn't answer the question. You've got a perfectly good holiday here, if you want to call it that, or a perfectly good festival, perfectly good feast day, that God himself says this shall be commemorated for all time. And the Christian church basically says, no, we're not going to do that. We'll remember what happened on the Passover in New Testament time. What happened on the Passover in New Testament times? Jesus is crucified and rises again. So that's going to be our Passover. But you can't do both. You can't commemorate the Exodus from Egypt and God's great miracle there, and also the death of Christ and the resurrection. You can't do all three? What's the matter with you? What's your problem? Because that's Jewish. That's Jewish. We don't want anything to do with that. That's wrong, folks. That's just plain wrong. It should not happen that way. The Christian church should have incorporated Hanukkah. They should have incorporated Purim. They should have incorporated Yom Kippur. They should have incorporated all the other holidays, Passover and all the rest of them. They should have incorporated those into the Jewish church, into the Christian church year. But because of bigotry and prejudice, hatred, vengeance, revenge against the Jews, they didn't. It wasn't a very Christian thing to do, was it? No, it wasn't. Unfortunately, it's too late now. Very hard. First time I had Passover here in this congregation, I had members come up to me who were livid, who were red-faced in their anger to me, who swore to me they would never come back here to church because I had Passover here. I won them over eventually, or God did. But yeah. And again, as I pointed out to those people, they didn't want to hear it, but I said, that's just bigotry, that's prejudice. Well, Pastor Hoffenschmapper, back in Managua or whatever, he said, no, we don't do that. In German, of course. Max nix. Whatever, right? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the ad we were talking about advertising that they're doing about the Ukraine Jews that we're supposed to feed them.
Yes.
And give them money. And
Yes,
stuff like
yes,
that.
yes.
Only to the Ukraine Jews.
Yeah. That's a little weird too, isn't it? Yeah.
Quite make it in the United States with
Yeah,
this discrimination.
that's a little odd, isn't it? Yeah,
Yes,
it really is. It really is. Yeah.
It offends me to hear that.
Yeah.
They let next door neighbor starve to death just because they're not a Jew.
Yeah. Crazy. Any other comments about Passover? We have about 5 minutes.
Do you want me to return to having it here?
Oh yeah. We'll do it this year. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll do it this year. It's on the calendar this year. So yeah, Monday, Thursday. So except for the lamb, huh? Good. Yeah, a lot of Lutheran churches have kind of adopted it. Frankly, not a majority certainly, but a good number. Some other Protestant churches have also adopted it. So yeah. Liturgically speaking and ritualistically speaking, it's kind of hard to do. Purim, for example. Purim is the retelling of the Esther story. It's rather long and involved. It would be, we would have to get people to play parts. It takes a good number of heads. It takes a good population in a church to pull that off. Did you? Yeah. Yeah. The children, a congregation with a lot of kids, for example, would be able to pull it off pretty well. I suppose there's no reason we do Hanukkah except we got Advent and kind of interferes a little bit with Advent. Okay, Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah we do it really in a way at first Sunday in Advent, and again we repeat it at New Year's Eve. And Day of Atonement is kind of every day. I mean every Sunday. Day of Atonement is really every Sunday because we have confession, absolution. So yeah, we kind of celebrate those things. Now, I suppose we could have a Sunday of Day of Atonement, I guess, or a Sunday of Rosh Hashanah, I suppose. Again, to incorporate it liturgically, we would have to kind of cut out some of our New Testament liturgical things, and I hesitate to do that. Passover is easy because it's Maundy, Thursday, and it's the Lord's Supper and everything, and the Lord's Supper joins so nicely with the Passover supper. The Lord's Supper and Passover supper are so connected historically and theologically that that's easy to do. Some of the other ones are not quite so easy to pull off, but that one is. Okay. All right. This is a good place to stop. We'll pick it up at verses 29 to 32. Any other questions or comments? Give you a few more minutes to get settled in your church. Let's close. May the grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the love of God the Father, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be and abide with us all. Amen. Thank you.
How's Doug doing? Doug or Bob? The truck driver? The neck brace? Okay. How was your time?
Busy. A lot of driving. Ugh.
Oh, yeah.
I don't like all that driving,
I know.
especially going through LA. I hate going through LA. Ugh.
Lanes.
Oh, some places in LA they're 7, 8 across, and they're full. Yeah, and they're full, and they're bumper to bumper. And these people are going bumper to bumper at 80 miles an hour.
Yeah.
It's no wonder they have huge crashes of 30, 40
Yeah,
cars.
no kidding.
Yeah, because nobody can
Chain
stop.
reaction,
Yeah,
just like
but you don't dare slow down. The guy in the back of you just run right over you.
Yeah.
So you're all stuck. It's like doing the Daytona 500.
No kidding.
It is crazy, yeah. And you're doing curves and hills, and it's nuts. Absolutely nuts. Ugh. Sure.
Sir?
She goes, I did it 2 days ago.
You go around here.